Is it focused? I hope so. Ooh, spook hair. Spooky Sunday dinners, spooky Sunday dinners, spooky Sunday dinners. I still can't afford a theme song. Hey guys, for those of you that don't know, my name is Johnny Taylor and this is Spooky Sunday Dinners, where every Sunday, every other Sunday, when I'm late, Monday, Thursday, one day, we talk about a true crime case that I just really want to talk about while we make a fairly easy recipe. So, if true crime, cooking, and dark humor is your thing, you might want to hit that subscribe button below. Hi friends, we're back with something a little different this week. Last week's episode was kind of really dark, and I didn't realize how much that affects people. So I thought this week, for the first time ever, we'd switch it up with our very first ever survivor story. Yeah, spoiler, survivor. Now, while this is our very first survivor story, it might also be the craziest story we've ever done. So, this week, we are going to be talking about the badass that is Mary Vincent, while we make a super easy garlic butter rosemary chicken breast. Sounds like a lot, but it might be your go-to weeknight meal. So, we know who we're talking about and what we're making, which can only mean it's Karen disclaimer time. Hi Karen, I'm ready for you this week. Karen disclaimer number 1. These are not professional recipes. I don't have the nutritional facts and they're not really for nutritional value. It's just what I feel like making that day. If you make this and you don't like it or you mess up and get sick, it's not my fault, Karen. I know it's iffy because it's chicken, but get it together. Again, not professional. I barely scrape mediocre. Karen disclaimer number 2. This is Spooky Sunday Dinners. Emphasis on spooky. We talk about true crime, murder, disease, and all things messed up, while we sprinkle a nice little bit of comedy on top. That's how I cope with being obsessed with something so dark. If that offends you in any way, shape, or form, makes you want to pick up a phone to call, text, email, or DM me about how terrible of a person I am, do it, Karen. My confidence is up. Feeling good this week. Let's have a chat. Alright, now that that's over and I'm feeling feisty this week, let's get into the ingredients. As usual, they'll be listed in the description below. This is just so you don't get mad at me. Can you see it? 2 to 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts. I'm not picky, this was what was on sale at Vaughn's. Butter of choice, y'all know I always use Earth Balance, and fresh rosemary. We're going to be using around 1/4 to 1/2 cup of butter. 4 to 6 cloves of garlic. Mine are giant, so I'm gonna just go with 4. Queso of choice. This week I'm gonna be going in with a super simple Italian style blend. Always a favorite in this house. I wouldn't know. And for our other seasonings, just salt and pepper. So the first thing we're gonna do is preheat our oven to 375 degrees. From there, we're gonna get our butter and just melt it on medium heat in a skillet while we talk about who Mary Vincent is. All right, 1/4 cup of butter right into the skillet. Now, Mary Vincent, wow. So she was born in 1963, the same year as my mom actually, born and raised in Las Vegas. Her father was a mechanic and her mother was a blackjack dealer. Now, while this starts to melt, we're gonna go ahead and make sure we mince all of that garlic. All right guys, once our butter is nice and melted, we're just gonna go in with that minced garlic and work it around in here until it becomes fragrant and starts to get a little bit of color. So Mary wasn't super close to her parents as a teen, and this caused her to peace out. Now mind you, this was the 70s. She was like, hey guys, I'm out of here, and her parents were like, cool, see you later. And she actually ended up living on the streets and would sleep in like parked cars. Now she had the idea to try to travel from Las Vegas, Nevada, all the way to her grandfather's house in California in 1978. So just for a little bit of some insight, she's 15 years old. So Mary decides that she's going to hitchhike. Mary's like, I'm exhausted, I'm gonna make this trip. And she actually gets picked up by a merchant seaman in Berkeley, California by the name of Lawrence Singleton. He's driving a van. He's looking like he's in his like 60s, nice grandfather, right? All right, guys, our garlic is starting to get some color and is super fragrant. I'm just gonna throw in about 3 sprigs of that rosemary and take it off heat. And while that rosemary is infusing in our butter sauce, I'm gonna go ahead and butter the baking dish and place our chicken in there seasoned with both salt and pepper. So what's so weird about Mary's story is there's actually 2 hitchhikers behind her on the same trail. When Lawrence shows up, he says to all the hitchhikers, hey, I only have room for one, points to Mary and says, you. The other hitchhikers actually get a glimpse and they're like, hey, hey kid, the back of this guy's van is empty. He is lying to you. Like, there's room for us. Something's not right. Mary is exhausted. She decides, like, you know what? This hitchhiking isn't for me. Can you take me back to Vegas? The guy's like, yeah. So she decides, you know, against her better judgment that she's going to get in this van and trust this man that looks like her grandpa, right? So she gets in the van. She's like, hey, I need to, you know, obviously, like I said, get back to Vegas. He says, which doesn't totally make sense to me, I'm going to Reno. I'll take you as far as Los Angeles. I'll drop you in Los Angeles and you can figure it out from there, kid. And she's okay with it. She's like, yeah, I get it. That's fine. And she's so exhausted. She's been hitchhiking for God knows how long that she falls asleep in his car. Now, I don't have to tell you not to hitchhike, but I sure as hell shouldn't have to tell you to not hitchhike and fall asleep in the back of an old man's van. Remember Albert Fish? How do we feel about old men? All right, guys, we're just gonna take this sauce, drizzle it right on top of that chicken in our baking dish. From here, super simple, our chicken is gonna go in the oven for the first 35 minutes. It should look a little something like this. So Mary is asleep in the back of this strange man's van, and by the time she wakes up, she realized that they have gone east and not south. Good thing for Mary is she speaks up for herself and says, hey, what the heck is going on? Lawrence says, I'm an old man. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I took a wrong turn. Let me turn around. Let's get back on the road. But first, I have to use the bathroom. I'm so sorry. It's dark outside. Mary, in her gut, knows that there's something wrong. He pulls over. He gets out of the car to relieve himself, and Mary starts immediately making a plan. She looks down and sees that one of her shoes is untied. She's like, you know what? This is a perfect excuse to get out of the van. I know I'm gonna have to make a run for it. I can't do it with an untied shoe, but hey, I just have to get out of the van to like stretch my legs, tie my shoe. Hops out of the van, bends down to tie her shoe, and the whole world goes black. Lawrence has hit Mary in the head with a sledgehammer. Now, just before everything goes black, Mary does see a sign that says she's outside of Modesto, California. Now, this is the late 70s, and this area of California was basically like being in the middle of nowhere, but she knows that she's somewhat close to the 5. When Mary wakes up, she is in the back of the van, tied up and naked. Lawrence repeatedly rapes Mary all night into the morning, and she just focuses on her plan. She asks him, please, just let me go. I just want to be let go to go home. And mind you, she's 15 years old. She begs him, and finally in the morning, after the sun comes up and Lawrence is done being a complete and total piece of, he unloads her from the van and unties her. She thinks that she's finally going to be able to be set free. And he tells her, you want to be set free? I'll set you free. Turns around, pulls out a hatchet, and cuts off Mary's left arm, just below the elbow. Mary immediately goes into shock, and the only response she has and grab Lawrence's arm with her right hand. She's trying to stabilize herself and stop him. All of a sudden, Mary knows she's grabbing his arm, but as she describes, somehow she's on her back and looking up at the sky. That's when she realizes that Lawrence has cut off her right arm as well. One of the most horrible details that she tells is when she sits up to look at him, Lawrence is literally flicking his arm. And that's when she puts together that her right hand is still gripped on Lawrence's arm. He gets her hand off of him, picks Mary up, and throws her over the side of like the interstate freeway situation down the side of a 30-foot cliff into a ravine. Miraculously, Mary only breaks 4 ribs on the way down. I'm not gonna stop saying that she's a 15-year-old child, and a badass one at that. I'm gonna start a Mary Vincent fan club. T-shirts coming soon. So 15-year-old Mary Vincent is laying in this ravine, 4 ribs broken, both of her arms gone, naked, covered in blood and dirt, and bleeding out quickly. She recalls that all she wants to do in her body's immediate response is to fall asleep. She's cold and wants to sleep. But in the back of her brain, she knows she's not falling asleep because she's exhausted. She's falling asleep because she's dying. And Mary proceeds to tell herself, don't fall asleep, get up, because if you get up, they can catch this man. Also, I'm not making this story up. This is 100% true. This is where Mary's fight or flight instincts really kick in. And fair warning, this is graphic. Mary takes her arms that are severed and finds some dirt and makes her own packs with the dirt to stop the bleeding on her wounds. It is instinctual. She puts them in, she packs the dirt as best as she can, and now she knows it's time to climb. And Mary climbs up the 30-foot ravine. Now, mind you, he did this to her in the morning as soon as the sun came up. And by nightfall, Mary was up and walking on the road. But that's not it. This little girl, once she got up, walked 3 miles. She could hear the sound of the 5 and was just trying to walk toward it because she knew that if someone saw her, they would help her. I cannot even make it up the stairs at home without taking a break, so. Finally, after 3 miles, a convertible drives up next to her and slows down. It's 2 young men, and when she turns to them, she's like a light at the end of the tunnel. They see this child, naked, no arms, covered in blood, walking. It's straight out of a Wes Craven film. Like he probably made a film about this, I don't know. But they see her, right? It's 2 young guys. They look at her and they're like, oh hell no, it's above me. And they speed away. I know those men would not be my friend to this day. But I'm also curious about how they feel. Mary continues to walk almost a mile longer. When, by luck, by chance, by Wes Craven himself, a married couple, well, a couple that just got married, were on their honeymoon and accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up off the 5. So they're just driving down these random streets and back roads and all these things trying to get back onto it. And they pull up to Mary. Best honeymoon ever. They see her, they load her in the back of the truck and tell her, we are going to get you help. Mary remembers they were speeding so quickly she could hear the screeching of the tires, and they actually weren't trying to get to a hospital. They were just trying to get to a phone nearby. As soon as they get to a phone, they call 911, and they don't even send an ambulance out to her. They immediately airlift Mary to the nearest hospital. Mary gets to the hospital, and nearly half the blood in her body is gone. As soon as she's stable, she's ready and asks to talk to an officer because she has to tell them her story because she is like adamant that this man needs to be caught. I love this kid. You don't understand. If my kid is not as badass as this, I will send them back. I feel like I have to keep reminding myself that this is a true story because could you imagine, like, 15 years old, they just saved your life, you just lost your arms, you wake up in the hospital, as soon as you're stable, you're like, I need to talk to a cop, this is what he looked like. She was memorizing how much she thought he weighed, how tall he was, like the whole thing, you guys. She gives the police such a good description that when that photo hits the news, Lawrence Singleton's neighbor and friend for years is like, there's no denying it, that's my neighbor, and immediately calls. Be that person. It's not weird that you watch those shows. It's not weird that you keep an eye out for every single person that passes you. These masks are making it really hard for me to do that. But please wear one and stay safe. Don't be that person. I don't want to end up on America's Most Wanted. But if I do, will you guys please make sure they actually use like a good photo of me, like a Facetune, a filter, something. Because if they post a bad photo to me, I will make sure that you never find me. Ever. Same goes if I'm murdered. So 9 days later, Lawrence is found and they arrest him, and this man, well, he's not a man, he's a child, tells police that there were 2 other, quote, hookers in the car, that Mary was a, quote, $10 whore, and that he didn't attack her. His other homie, Larry, that was in the car, actually did it. He like went along with it. Make it make sense, Lawrence. Make it make sense. You had 9 days. I could have come up with something better in 9 minutes. He went as far as to say that Mary attacked him. Have you guys seen a 15-year-old girl? It honestly looks not much different than me. Am I gonna watch out? So obviously police are like, no, shh. But 6 months later, Mary Badass Vincent she's been fitted and already has her prosthetics, and she goes to that trial and faces Lawrence at it. She looks him dead in the eye. She tells them everything that's happened. She's extremely brave. She sets an example for young women everywhere. She's not scared. And of course, as she's leaving the courtroom, Lawrence whispers to her, "If it's the last thing I'll do, I'll finish the job." She is a child. She can't even drive yet. In March of 1979, Lawrence Singleton is charged with the maximum amount of time they can legally sentence him to in California, which is a whopping 14 years for what he did to that child. Even the judge that sentenced him was so upset, he went on record to say, quote, "If I had the power, I would send him to prison for the rest of his natural life." Now with that, Mary did win a $2.56 million settlement with Lawrence and actually never received that money. Lawrence said that he was unemployed, in bad health, and only had $200 in savings, so Mary didn't end up getting a dime. I haven't even gotten to the craziest part of this yet. So California had a work incentive law, which was kind of like secretly passed, and it basically meant that with good behavior, inmates could work like different jobs in the prison and get like days off of their sentence for like days worked. And with that mixed with good behavior, after 8 years, Lawrence was going to get out on parole. So Lawrence is going to be released into Contra Costa County out here in California, and a mayor of a town in the county protests it, right? So he protests it. He's like, absolutely not. So the DOC decides that they're actually going to release him on parole in Tampa. Officials in California call officials in Tampa. They let them know what's going on, and they protest it there as well. Officials were able to get involved there and reject the parolee. So he couldn't stay in California, got rejected, couldn't go to Tampa. Protests were like insane protests, you guys. Like the Tampa protest was literally led by the Guardian Angels, which if you don't know what they are at that time, please look it up. It's super cool. I wish we had that more now, but they were like the Tampa, Florida chapter. They led the protest, rejected the parolee. So they try again to release him on parole in a different town in Contra Costa County out here. And that is where some officials step in and have the genius idea where 5 officials actually are granted a restraining order against Lawrence. So he can't be placed in that town in the county. From there, they try San Francisco, and the chief of police in San Francisco does the same thing, and now Lawrence cannot go to San Francisco either because there's more restraining orders. They end up safely getting him to a hotel just outside of San Francisco, and it's unknown who leaks it to the press, but it gets leaked. I think it was one of the officers. And the officers are literally having to escort this like child rapist and attempted murderer in bulletproof vests from hotel to hotel, from city to city, to keep him safe because people are just showing up, like hundreds of people. One of the crowds was as big as 500 people, and they were like, look, he comes here, we're taking him out. It is very a la Richard Ramirez, if you will. They take him, same thing happens in El Cerrito. They try 3 more cities, and officials in the Bay are all working with each other from town to town, city to city, county to county, letting them know where he's going so they can do the same thing because nobody wants this man in their town. Finally, the governor of California at the time has the idea to actually get a trailer and put it on the grounds of San Quentin, and that's where he needs to serve his year of parole. Because honestly, if they were to let him go anywhere, this man would not survive. And is it really that bad if he wouldn't? But he serves that year in his trailer on San Quentin, and then unfortunately, he's free to go wherever he wants, and he chooses to go to Florida. At this time, people try to run him out of town. A car dealership offers him like $5,000 to leave. He won't leave. He loves being the center of attention and the villain. A horrible man, you guys. He loves being a horrible man, a monster. And by 1997, he's living comfortably in Florida. And that's the end. Of course, that's not the end, you guys. That would be way too simple. All right, guys, our first 35 minutes is almost up. From here, all we're gonna do is take that chicken out of the oven, keeping it at our 375, layer it with as much as that Italian cheese as your heart tells you to put on it, and then we're just gonna throw it back in for another 7 minutes while we wrap up what is not a good ending to this story. So there's that. So while in 1997, and with his neighbors keeping a very, very close eye on him, a neighbor ends up calling 911 because he sees what he believes is Lawrence attacking what looks like a young woman. When police arrive, they find the body of 31-year-old Roxanne Hayes, who was the mother of 3 and a sex worker. She had been stabbed around 12 times in her face and torso, because who would have thought that would happen? Me. I would have thought that would happen. Now, my heart really told me to pack on the cheese here, but it's completely up to you guys how much you want to do. Once you pack in that cheese and throw it in for the last 7 minutes, all that butter and garlic and rosemary is going to turn into a nice sauce that you can drizzle on top of this when you serve it. So once Mary heard about what happened, she actually packed up her stuff and went to Lawrence Singleton's trial in Florida. She retold them her story and everything she went through since, because of course her life was never going to be the same. She talked about how when she heard he was getting out, her life completely fell apart. She was trying to go to art school and better herself, and she just was constantly living in fear because remember, when he told a 15-year-old child in court he was going to finish the job. If I would have been in that courtroom, honestly, if I would have been in that courtroom, the next trial probably would have been mine. Honestly. After just 1 hour of deliberation, Lawrence was sentenced to death because Florida. Now, whether you agree with the death penalty or not, everybody was really happy about it because they were like, we're finally gonna get justice. We're gonna get this guy. We are gonna kill this guy. And of course, when he was sentenced, he still denied like attacking and cutting off Mary's arms, and then decided to say about the murder of Roxanne, quote, "I'm sorry about the death in this case. It's something I'll have to carry on my conscience for the rest of my life." Narcissistic man say what? So you can imagine everybody in Florida is like, we got him, let's do this. And they didn't, because Lawrence died of cancer in prison in 2001. And I don't believe in the death penalty, but for some reason that bothers the shit out of me. I'm gonna one more time say that this is a real true story. She was 15. Mary ended up getting married, moving to OC, and having 2 children. She started the Mary Vincent Foundation for Victims of Traumatic Crimes and has spoken and just been the ultimate empowering woman ever. She's a fighter and a badass, and actually went on to tell her story on one of the greatest television programs of all time called I Survived. She tells it beautifully, and I would highly recommend you please go watch it, because that's why I'm doing this episode. It inspired me. It made me want to binge and learn everything I could about her. And remember guys, stop trusting people. Don't trust anyone. A man, don't trust him. Woman, don't trust him. Grandma, don't trust her. Grandpa, just right away. For legal purposes, I am not telling you to attack anyone's grandfather. Thank you. All right guys, that 7 minutes is up, so we're gonna go ahead, pull our chicken out of the oven and plate it. Amazon storefront. All right guys, and this is that finished product straight out of the oven. We're gonna plate it and be sure to drizzle that really good sauce on top. So I don't know about how y'all feel about this case. It's one that I don't even have to look at my notes to tell you the story, because I just think about it all the time. And I want to know if you've ever heard of it, or if it's one that disturbs you like last week. Sorry about that. Thank you guys so much for cooking with me this week, and thanks for letting me tell you this insane story. Be sure to comment below future crimes you want me to cover and recipes you want me to try. I don't think you can see it. We'll do the overhead instead. Thank you for watching Spooky Sunday Dinners. I am still singing. I still can't afford a theme song. You guys, the new place is really coming together. I'm gonna have to show you one of these weeks. Wanna see your chicken?
Yes. There's a lot of it. Oh. I have food for one night. Wow. You're welcome for that.
Oh,
That made the bloopers.